What is going on YouTube? This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to review the second album by King Gordy. Basically, this project is called King of Horrorcore Volume 1, and it came out in 2006. There's kind of minimal information about this particular project here, but it is pretty much a big deal in this field. This project was a particular big deal in like the field of horrorcore and underground music and juggalo music as far as that pitch kind of particularly happened with it. I definitely appreciate this project quite a bit. I'd have to say it's not going to get like a super rave score, but it's going to get pretty close to that. I'd have to say it's definitely a masterful work of album. I'd have to say definitely appreciate this album just enough to definitely appreciate this album quite a bit. I'd have to say it's just some excellent type fare here, and this is definitely unlike most stuff. If this would have been 2006, I probably would have given this album. If it would have been 2006, I probably would have given this album a 10 out of 10 because this is just blisteringly different from the stuff that was out in 2006. This is much different from albums like T.I.'s King and Young Dro's Best Thing Smoking, some of those type pitches. New Jock City, some of those type ones, Lil Wayne's The Carter 2, and Like Father, Like Son, some of these type ones, just the relative pitch. Eminem presents the re-up, some of these particular type ones. This is just pretty visceral, I'd suppose. Definitely some excellent concepts here just to particularly kind of get it. It barely feels like this came out of 2006 as far as that particular fair kind of happens. But I would have to say, I mean, normally the promotion for a King Gordy album is pretty minimal, and I'd have to say that this album was kind of tricky to find. I'd have to suppose. I'm not sure if you can. I checked on eBay to see if this album was available for purchase on CD as far as that pitch kind of particularly happened with it, but it wasn't. I'd have to say, and it's only available for digital purchase on Amazon. So it's kind of a tricky. So this album is kind of a tricky project to find. I remember back in the day that King Gordy's 2003. I remember back in the day that King Gordy's The Entity album from 2003 was a pretty tricky find also. I'd have to suppose pretty expensive buy just within that particular pitch. But I'd have to say this is an excellent project here just for the most part. I'd have to say it's mildly kind of haphazard, but for the vast majority, over 70% of this album is particularly pretty kick-ass, I'd have to suppose. So it's a good enough concept to get that in particular. So I'm going to go ahead and recommend the songs on here. I just would have to say, I mean, this is definitely some blistering like horrorcore here, I would definitely suppose. This is the concept. A lot of these productions are pretty excellent. These sound state of the art even in these productions on King of Horrorcore Volume 1 sound state of the art even 18 years later as far as that particular pitch kind of happens. But this is definitely some quality stuff here, I'd have to suppose. It's kind of light on guests, I'd have to say, but for the most part this concept works particularly kind of well. I don't know who particularly produced this album. I know the 2003 album The Entity by King Gordy had some productions from Eminem's old buddies, the Bass Brothers, as far as that pitch kind of happens. But the Wikipedia article about this particular album doesn't really list the producers. But the Wikipedia article about this particular album doesn't list the producers, I'd have to suppose. But it's still dope enough. I mean, there's a ton of good kick-ass productions on here. I'd have to say definitely some excellent type stuff just to get pretty surely, I'd have to suppose. So we'll go ahead and talk about the songs I recommend on here, I'd have to say. So basically, there's 16 songs on this particular album. Basically, there's 20 songs on this album, but 3 Smokers interludes, I'd have to say, slashes it down to 17. And then there's kind of a King's Freestyle, which is not that good of a song. Just a brief minute and 20-second type song that doesn't really do much. So I'm going to narrow it down to 16 songs. That also includes the intro, which is kind of a hodgepodge type song, but I still will count that one, even though I'm not going to recommend it. So basically, without promotion on this particular album, the 10 songs out of 16 I recommend on here would be Juggalette, Killa, Go Ahead and Die, Horrorcore, Heaven and Hell, Howl at the Moon, Bullets Galore, Mr. Evil, I Don't Want to Die, and Suicide. So a lot of these are pretty sheer. I would have to say definitely some boisterous type material. This is a pretty visceral album in terms of horrorcore. King Gordy definitely suits that particular title, being the King of Horrorcore. King Gordy definitely suits that title, being the King of Horrorcore, because a lot of these are just pretty sheer and just overall grim and haunted. There's just a lot of ghastly type stuff that just has like a pretty sheer type pitch that just is pretty menacing, and just overall moroseness that just has a fitting edge towards it, I'd have to say. So to talk about some of these. One of the best songs off the particular album, and this is the most popular. One of the best songs in this particular album, and this is the most popular song according to Spotify, is Juggalette. Definitely recommend this song just for Juggalettes out there, just within that particular pitch. Some gothic ladies, as far as that pitch kind of particularly happens with it. It's like a sparkly kind of night fair of a song, I'd have to say. It's like a gothic ladies gem, I would definitely feel like, and this is just good for some after hours kickback, definitely. And I feel like this is just a relatively commercial kind of juggalo hit. So it's just a real sparkling type one that just works pretty well, I'd have to say. It's some good night type fare just within that relative pitch. It's a good kind of concept to get on here, just to have some of these juggalette type tunes just within that particular pitch of getting that sort of fare as far as I would kind of go with it. It's a real nice night type fare. It's a pretty basic type one. It's pretty vanilla type one in terms of that relative pitch. It's probably one of the more commercial songs on here. I would have almost liked the music video for this particular song would have been a pretty nice one to have gotten, but it's still a pretty good stellar song, I'd have to say, just within the relative pitch of just some juggalo, just some entry kind of juggalo type music just within the concept. There's definitely a lot more visceral type songs on here, but this is one that's just not as full blown horrorcore. I'd have to say it's just kind of a commercial kind of underground rap type tune. I'd have to say, but it is a nice one. Horrorcore is a pretty nice song. Definitely appreciate this one. This is like a doom like horror bubbler. I'd have to say, definitely reminds me of that. This reminds me of like a leery kind of twisted like music. I'd have to say, and by twisted, I'm talking about the Freak Show and ICP affiliated Twisted. I'd have to say pretty good concept for that. It's like a creepy and gem. I would definitely feel like, and this is just a good song to smoke a sweet to. So it's a pretty dope concept. Get this one. Really brooding type beat. I definitely appreciate this one. There's some real haunting type stuff on here. This is pretty much like a more, this one's not quite as entry, but it's just a good concept to get some of these. This would work as like a pretty good hangout type fare just within that relative pitch. Just a real scraggly kind of night, just with the trees looking scraggly and stuff like that. Just some real grimness and just overall doom like horrorcore type bubblers as far as that pitch kind of happens. Some real grim type ones. One of the best beats on this particular album, one of the best songs in this particular album is Howl at the Moon. Definitely appreciated this one quite a bit. This like a biting kind of grim mess hall John of a song, I'd have to say. Definitely appreciate this one. This one feels like elegant horrorcore, I'd have to say, and this is just some good moonlight music. And this song just has some overall shrillness, I'd have to say. So it's definitely a pretty highlighted one. I feel like songs like Howl at the Moon, Killa. There's like another one on here, Heaven and Hell. Some of these are really some of visceral type ones that just remind me of some of the most haunting 3-6 Mafia and ICP type beats I'd have to suppose. Definitely some great excellent juggalo and underground type music and definite horrorcore classics as far as that pitch kind of happens. It just makes this a real, songs like Howl at the Moon just make this a real sin that this album's just not more readily available for CD, because it's definitely worth the purchase. This is easily, I would even say if this album is worth $50, $60, $70, something like that, it's still worth the purchase just because of songs like this. I'd have to say, just some real visceral type stuff. Bullets Galore is a pretty highlighted one. I'd have to say this is like an out and about kind of pounder. I would have to suppose this is like a decent buzz like single. I would have to say, and this is just kind of an errands tune in like a horror sense. I would feel like, and this song just kind of has some busyness about it. This one just has a little bit more bustle. What the song conveys in the lyrics kind of make it more of like a horrorcore type tune, just kind of more of like a rugged type tune, just within that sense. But it definitely just reminds me of just something to listen to in your paying bills, just in like the night wind, just in like the autumn time, as far as that pitch kind of happens. Just some evening type sense to get for like 7:30, 6:30 p.m. Some pitches like that. Just a real good concept. Just some real good finishing up errands and tasks as far as that particular pitch kind of has with it. Just a real out and about kind of pounder that just has it's a real good out and about pounder that has some real grim haunting typeness about it that works pretty well. It's just kind of has a little bit of jive about it. Just a real kind of bustling type one that just has a little bit of pulse, and this song has a little bit of a pulse to kind of just be just within the bustle and sense of that, I'd have to suppose. So that's a nice one. Mr. Evil's another one that's kind of similar. Mr. Evil's another one that's kind of similar to Bullets Galore. I'd have to say this is like a residential kind of haunting stroll-like music. I'd have to suppose. Definitely a good concept for that. This is like some regular autumn traverse of a song, I'd have to say, and this is just some vanilla spookness. I would definitely feel like, and this is just good for some day glaze. This is kind of like a good, I feel like Mr. Evil and Bullets Galore are like a good 1-2 punch to kind of have like some spooky kind of horrorcore type sense, just within the sense of just out and about, just kind of on the town and just stuff like that, just within just some good kind of grim car traverse as far as that pitch kind of happens, just hitting up the mailbox, getting stamps, stuff like that, just paying the last bit of bills, getting some snacks at Burger King, some stuff like that, just within that relative pitch, just as to how some of those things particularly kind of happen. Suicide is a pretty highlighted one. This is like a militant kind of night marcher of a song, I'd have to say. Definitely a good concept for that. It's like a good night product with some oozing. The song is some good night product with some oozing grimness about it, I would definitely have to suppose. And this song is just a warped kind of house party damnation, I'd have to suppose. So it's a dope enough concept to get that one particular. This is definitely kind of a suicide type bounce of a song, kind of similar to like the Nas song that he had off of his double album from 2004. Similar type bop, just within that relative pitch. It's just kind of a suicide is just kind of a crotchety and glazed type song, just a good kind of house party type bubbler to get within that relative pitch. Just suicide is just kind of a crotchety and glazed type bubbler to kind of get within that relative sense of some house party type night fare, just within that relative pitch of doing that, just within that kind of grimness and just overall underground type fare. It has supposed pretty nice one, has some jive about it. Definitely kind of a similar one to like I Don't Want to Die and some of those type ones. A little bit of Mr. Evil, in there, some songs like that. I'd have to suppose definitely some good concepts of one and another. It's also pretty similar to the song Horrorcore. I'd have to suppose get some good enough concepts to get some of these. I do like the fact that King Gordy kind of had some of these like house party type gems on here, just because there's not really any nightclub songs on here, I'd have to say. So it's just some good house party type fare just to kind of get in a relative kickback type sense. I definitely feel like I Don't Want to Die, Suicide, Horrorcore, some of those type ones are just some real nice ones for that sort of appeal. Some of these just have a little bit more social drive about them and just kind of ousting point just for like some good jaunting kind of mess hall type relative kind of social affabilities, I'd have to suppose. So some dope enough concepts to get some of those. I would have to say that Go Ahead and Die is a pretty highlighted one. I would definitely feel like this is like a somber kind of vintage horrorcore moroseness of a song. I would feel like this just feels like a Dracula type music of a song, I'd have to say. And this is just a refined and grim type song, I would definitely feel like. So this is a pretty highlighted one. This is another one that kind of feels, I'm not sure if I talked about Go Ahead and Die, or I'm not sure if I talked about Go Ahead and Die already, but this is one that's similar to Heaven and Hell and Howl at the Moon as far as that particular pitch kind of has with it. I'd have to suppose some good enough concepts to get some of those. Just some real haunting, somber kind of piano type beats that just have a lot of good grimness about them that just work, and some real demonic type ones and dirge like ones I'd have to suppose. That's some good highlight type stuff. Another one that's pretty shrill like that, and this is another one of the ones that's one of the best on this particular album, is Heaven and Hell. Definitely appreciate this one quite a bit. It's like a sharp kind of morose despondence of a song, I'd have to say. It's like a shrill kind of This song is some shrill kind of Dracula-like music, I'd have to say, and this is just great for brooding autumn. This is just great for a brooding autumn, I would have to feel like, and this is just a very chilling type song. So these are definitely some shrill type ones. It's easy to see why King Gordy calls himself the king of horrorcore with songs like this. Just some excellent fare as far as that pitch kind of has. Just a lot of these are pretty morose. When I say Dracula type music, I definitely feel like just the elegance that Dracula kind of has, where he's dressed up and suited up and just looks snazzy and stuff like that. Just the relative kind of refinement where Dracula's just not like in jerseys and kind of looking loose as far as that pitch, just kind of more suited up and just a little bit more graceful within that relative pitch. There's just some graceful kind of horrorcore on here. Not all of this is just kind of like house party, this kind of mess hall type stuff, just with like the rowdiness and kind of caginess that I suppose. There's also some elegant type ones on here. Definitely feel like songs like Howl at the Moon, Heaven and Hell, Go Ahead and Die, Kill Us. Some of these type ones really have some of that type fare, but there are some kind of more cagey type ones and rowdy type ones on here also, like Suicide and I Don't Want to Die, Mr. Evil, some of those type ones, Bullets Galore in certain senses, some of those particular type ones. Horrorcore definitely I'd have to suppose some good enough concepts to get some of those in particular. Another kind of house party type one would be Juggalette, of course. That's a real good commercial type entry type one to kind of get. That's definitely one of the most commercial ones on here is Juggalette. So I'd have to say some good concepts. I'm not sure if I talked about I Don't Want to Die yet either. I forgot if I did, so I'm going to go ahead and talk about this one again. It's like a jivey kind of grim evening fun of a song, I'd have to say. It's like a horrorcore kind of house party and festivities of a song, I would definitely feel like. And this is just a spooky kind of dap song, I would definitely have to say. And the song is just a gem. So definitely appreciate this one. This one just has like that grimness factor about it. This is just another one, once again, that kind of goes along with Suicide and some of those type ones. There's some real morose type ones that just kind of have like that kind of relative jive with just like some house party type fare, just with like the social kind of affability towards it, just for like some good night type fare, just for like late summer and autumn type pitches of just like some spookified type parties, I'd have to suppose. But it's just kind of the concept of just having that social jive about it. So it's just interesting. Just once again, there's not really like a nightclub type song on here, or like a dance club type song, but there is some kind of social pep and just relative. I mean, King Gordy has a little bit of affable energy on this particular project. It's actually pretty awesome. Going to get that. It's just too bad that Bizarre wasn't on this particular album. He would have done great on this particular album. I would have definitely had to suppose. That's a good concept about that. But yeah, that's basically the concept about this particular album, I'd have to say. I think I talked about all 10 of the songs I recommend. So talk about the 6 songs I don't recommend on here. Basically, just like King's Freestyle was just kind of a poor type one. Didn't really appreciate that freestyle or that production on there. The intro is just kind of a poor type one. Also, just didn't really appreciate like the instrumental on that particular one. I like the fact that King Gordy was trying to introduce things, talking to the juggalos and juggalettes as far as that pitch can happen, but it just was not appealing enough just within the sensible just of how to kick things off, I'd have to say. My Pain was kind of a poor production on here. This had one of the worst beats on here. It's not like a full-blown horrible type beat, but was kind of a poor one compared to some of these visceral type ones that are like 10 out of 10 and 9 out of 10 productions on here, I'd have to suppose. So this one just kind of pales in comparison to the rest of the album. I just would have to say like that. Nowhere to Run is just kind of a poor type one. That one felt like a gimmick type song that just was really not that catchy or affable at all, I'd have to say. Hey was just kind of a short song that just was kind of a Hey was just kind of a short song that was just kind of an awkward and pointless type song. It was just not really that catchy at all or real affable to kind of get off that particular one. Lucifer's Apology was kind of a nice one. That one had some moroseness about it, but it just didn't pull off the vibe quite as well as it needed to. That one could have really been a nice one. I just like the title of that particular song, Lucifer's Apology, but it just did a poor job of executing the particular vibes of that song but it just did a poor job of executing that particular song that song kind of needed as far as that pitch kind of happened with it. It was just not one that really had that particular affability, I'd have to suppose. And then FK, which is the Fat Killers. I like the fact that the Fat Killers, including Bang Belushi, are on this particular album. It was just not a very good song to kind of have them on. This was just kind of a poor Travers type song that just didn't really have the catchy energy of really having something that really want to have some bustle to it in that relative pitch. So that's just kind of concept. So me basically recommending 10 songs out of 16 off this particular album. So me basically recommending 10 songs out of 16 on this particular album. I'm going to go ahead and give this album like a 7.75 out of 10. It's pretty damn near close to getting an 8. I really wanted to give it an 8, but it just was missing like a, if I had enjoyed 13 songs out of 16, I would have given this album like a 10 out of 10. So it's pretty much just 7.75, just on the cusp of getting like a real kind of elegant and just overall sheer, just on the cusp of getting like a real rave score it had supposed to. This is definitely nothing to sneeze at. This particular album is just some sheer visceral type horrorcore that just nails it, and the execution of this is mostly off the meter just in terms of the concept, and especially for 2006, it's just quality beyond most albums out of the 2000s. I'd have to suppose just in terms of how many quality beats that are on here and stuff like that. It's just in terms of how many quality beats are on here and stuff like that. It's just kind of the concept that there's just not quite enough. I feel like there need to be like another song or two or three, something like that, that could have really capped off this particular project with some good stuff on here. The social score, I'm going to go ahead and give like a 9.25 2 out of 10 because I feel like there's definitely some social gems on here. I like the fact that King Gordy stepped out and had some social bubblers and stuff like that. Juggalettes, an excellent one. There's songs like Suicide, some of those type ones are pretty excellent, I'd have to say. On top of that, there's another one on here that works pretty well. Songs like I Don't Want to Die and Horrorcore, some of those type ones are also some social type tunes just to get within that relative pitch. So this is definitely a pretty visceral and social album. Definitely has some affability, and especially for a horrorcore album, and most of the time it's just kind of more isolated and just kind of more off to the wayside. It has to suppose it's definitely a pretty social dap kind of getting type one to just kind of have for some great house parties and stuff like that, and this overall autumn and night and craze type festivities as far as that pitch can have. It's definitely some smokish tunes and stuff like that, and songs for the juggalettes and things of that. Definitely some smokish tunes and songs for the juggalettes and things of those particular pitches that has supposed to. So some definite excellent stuff there, I'd have to say, just within that pitch. So in terms of the future, like King Gordy has been putting out like a bunch of collaboration EPs, I'd have to say. So some definite good concepts there. He has a couple collaborations. He has a couple collaboration albums on top of that. So some good stuff. And I would also have to say a fun fact about this particular album is he kind of samples like Eminem's type cadence and pitch on like the song Yellow Brick Road or one of those songs off of Encore. It's just interesting. I forget the song that he does that on. I want to say it's one of these songs on here that he kind of has like a similar cadence and pitch. I might put it in like the description, or I might put it in like the connotation as far as that pitch kind of happens with it. But this is definitely a pretty quality album here. It's just too bad it's not more available on CD and stuff like that, I'd have to suppose. But there's some definite excellent stuff here, and I'd have to say it's a pretty sheerly quality album for the most part. Just kind of somewhat mildly kind of haphazard, but for the most part, it's an overall kind of just quality victory here, I'd have to say.